arrived either this summer or some of you even in the past, not necessarily this year. And regardless of the time that you arrived, you may be coming out of your slumber of what is this really all about? What is school all about? What is it that I'm missing to advocate for my child? I'm very fond of saying that you are your child's best advocate because you know your child best. And so many times, especially when somebody is new, a teacher is apt to say something negative about a child's educational ability, whereas it's simply that he doesn't or she doesn't really know the language or doesn't really know how the school rhythm is meant to go. I'll tell you that when we were New Olim, a teacher came over to me very concerned about my daughter who only liked to sit in the corner and read. And the reason that she liked to sit in the corner and read during recess was because that was her time just for English and to be by herself and to not have to be on. Today, she herself is a teacher and her Hebrew is just fine. And she needed to go along her own process. So what we would like to do over the next 45 minutes or so is just bring to your awareness, is it school days that you're managing or a school days? Are you clear on where to turn for some services? Are your children clear on what to expect from their teachers and what to expect from you? And so, Tippy, I'll let you take it away. And of course, you can always contact us at answers@nbn.org.il. If you haven't already, I'm going to put that in the chat, our contact information. Aliyah beat me to it. And we are always here to answer your questions.
Thank you very, very much. So I'm going to continue. My name is Zippy, and some of you already know some of us. Miriam and myself and Aliza, who are all on this presentation, work together in the Nefesh B'Nefesh Answers Department, Post Aliyah Department. We're all part of a team that help Olim after they arrive in Israel. And first of all, just so you should know, this is being recorded and a link to the recording will be sent. It might take a couple of days for the recording has to be processed, but then we'll send you a follow-up email with the link and to the recording. And also, if we share various links here, I'll try to add that into the email, the text of the email that you're going to be sent. There might be some questions that you have. I'm going to suggest you hold off on typing in the questions in the chat until we kind of finish this presentation so that, we might answer the questions in the continuation of the presentation. If you have a question, a clarification question about something that's being said, if it's not clear, then of course, raise your hand. We're not a very large group, so hopefully we'll see it or type it in. While one of us is talking, the other two are looking at the chat and see if there's questions that do need to be addressed. So just first of all, as background, I think it's important to know the various education laws in Israel, meaning in Israel, school education is compulsory from the age of 3 to the age of 18, which is usually from the last year of kindergarten up to 12th grade. It's considered free, although it's definitely not free. There are school fees. The special education law, which provides special education for individuals even up to the age of, or including the age of 21, okay? The school fees, which some of you I'm sure know about, or sometimes Olim are forgiven those fees for the first year or given a discount, sometimes not. It depends on the school. If you paid full fee and you didn't know that you might be able to ask for a discount, it's not too late to ask. And sometimes you can get a refund if they agree. Hopefully schools know to offer that discount if it exists to new Olim. The school fees cover things such as Tiulim, which are outings, cover various cultural activities, cover book lending if the school has it, cover the Parents Association fees. There's some type of insurance also. So that's what the school fees cover. And that's why the fees grow as your children grow, because the school outings, as the kids get older, school outings get to be longer, more often, and then they cost more. They're supposed to also cover things like the Sufganiyah for the Hanukkah party, but you will find often that the school does ask for additional fees for small things like that. it would be helpful, I think, for us to know a little bit. And I'm looking at, I don't see any of you on the screen, but that's okay. It would be helpful for us to know actually which of the school systems your children are attending. The school system is divided, the public school system in Israel is divided into two major streams. One is the Mamlakti, which is the secular public school system, and one is the Mamlakti Dati and or the Mamlakti Haredi, which are the religious school systems. And then there's also the independent school system, as well as the Arab school system, which I'm sure we're not talking about today. So they are all a little bit different, but we're going to try and speak to, kind of cover all the options. If you want to put in the chat which type of school your children are in, what grade they're in, that might be helpful for us in the continuation. Are there any questions so far? And I'm just going to apologize. My eyes are going to be going up like this sometimes because I have my small screen here where my camera is, and I have my big screen here. And I'm on the big screen, for whatever reason, I can see the people, and I can't do that on the small screen. So my apologies if that looks a little awkward. Are there any questions so far? Okay, Mamlakti versus Mamlakti. Okay, fine.
I think that's a question, Tippy.
I didn't see it then, sorry. Yeah?
Is the question, Basiri family, what is the difference between Mamlakti and Mamlakti Dati?
Sure, we can benefit from any information. We're just starting the registration process. Hi, everyone. And our daughter's, just starting her first year. So we're going to benefit from everything you have to say.
Okay.
I'm happy to answer that question, Tippy.
Okay, please do.
Okay, to just give everybody an overview. And the reason that I'm going to give everyone an overview, even though your children might be very young and not yet in what's called a school system, or you're very happy where your kids are, but you might hear somebody else talking about their school system. It's nice to be in the know. In Israel, there's a lot of different streams of education because in Israel, there's very little separation between religion and education. And so if we talk about one end of the spectrum, we have the Mamlakti system, which is the public secular system, where even in the Mamlakti system, because we are a Jewish state, we're a Jewish country, there are still many things that somebody in a secular school system will learn about Jewish history, about identity, the Jewish identity. That's why so many taxi drivers can just whip off any quote from Tanakh because they took their matriculation exams, and even though they were in a secular system, they had to learn certain things. We then move on to the religious right, and we have the public religious school system. This is the Dati Leumi system. Dati means religious, and Leumi means national, and this is the national religious system. You have to the right of that what's called a Mamlakti Torani system. Somebody has already written that they have their child in that system. The Mamlakti Torani system is going to have more hours dedicated to religious subjects than the typical Mamlakti Dati system. You then have the more Orthodox system or ultra-Orthodox system, and that would be either the Chardal system or Haredi system. The Chardal system is Haredi Dati Leumi, where you might have right valued systems in the school, but still the national public school system for education. Kids in that system are most likely going to do a Shnat Shirut, a year of community service if they're girls, and or army if they're girls, and the boys will most likely go to what's called a Hesder Yeshiva and do army that way. In the Haredi system, which at least one of you are involved in that system, that is for a more religious Torah valued school day. The day is sometimes longer, and as the kids get older, much more of an emphasis on Torah subjects than secular subjects. The one system that I left out, and I apologize, is the Tali school system. The Tali school system is very similar to a Solomon Schechter school system. I wouldn't necessarily call it for the conservative or the reform necessarily, knowing certain families who go there, but it's very identity based. And so this is like the line, not the line, that's not the word I'm looking for, but this is like the different streams of education. And it's really important that wherever you educate your child, the school system is reflecting your personal philosophies in the home. That's always important. Okay, Tippy, thank you.
Thank you very much. And thank you everybody who wrote in a little bit where your children are. So we also had people writing questions prior to this session, and a lot of the questions were surrounded, what help can my children get in school? So I'm going to ask Aliza, if you can, to unmute yourself and explain a little bit about support that New Olim do get in school.
Okay, hi everyone, shalom. So as written here, Sh'ot Olim, which means Ulpan hours, Olim hours. It's important to note that as part of Misrad HaChinuch, which is the Ministry of Education in Israel, there's a separate department that's responsible for helping Olim students throughout the school systems, in the different systems that Miriam just covered, to help them integrate into the school system and learn the language. So Olim hours are the Ulpan hours that are designated to Olim children who come into the school system. It's important to note that the eligibility for the Sh'ot Olim is for your first year of Aliyah. Okay, the hours change. Basically it's funds that each school gets depending on the amount of Olim students they have in that school. So if a school has between 1 to 3 students, which, that's like, the beginning level, really, students should be receiving around 6 weekly hours of Hebrew. It doesn't mean one-on-ones. It's not a one-on-one tutorial. It could be in groups and it could be with other Olim kids in the school. But the Olim hours range around 6 weekly hours. If the school has a lot of Olim, they might be able to combine those hours and offer a little more. But those hours, like I said, are for the first year of Aliyah. If a school has a lot of Olim, they probably have a Rakezet Ulpan, someone who's the head of Ulpan in the school, which is a great contact for you to be in touch with and to ask about those hours and to see how they're divided up in the week for your child and their grade. And it's supposed to be someone who's certified to teach the language of Hebrew, not a volunteer in the school or something, but someone who's really been assigned to teaching and has the credentials to teach language and help students. If someone's entering school and is in Oleh from 7th grade through 12th grade, the eligibility goes for 2 years, for the first 2 years of Aliyah, as it's a little harder with the other subjects and demands of those years. So the eligibility grows to 2 years over that time. So you can definitely be in touch with the school, the principal, the teacher, if there's an Ulpan, the head of Ulpan in that school, to really understand how the hours specifically are divided. Every school has their way of dividing up those hours based on the children's needs and the amount of kids and the grades that they have, the different grades that they have Olim kids in the school. I know some people asked us about GAN. And I'll just say that GAN generally doesn't get Olim hours. However, there is an exception if a specific GAN has 3 kids who are Olim, and their definition of Olim are Olim from the same year, meaning just arrived this year, then the GAN can request, if they have at least 3 kids, to request to get 2 weekly hours for those kids in GAN for their Ulpan.
Okay. Did I lose you, Lisa?
No, I'm here. Are there
Okay.
any?
Yeah,
That's the general.
Are there any
Zaka
questions?
eligibility.
Yeah, I was going to ask you any questions about that specific part of the help that Olim children receive.
I would just like to make a suggestion. Some people mentioned that they have children in a GAN or children who are younger. And as Aliza mentioned, they are not eligible for formal Ulpan, but not only for that age, even for, a 6, 7, 8-year-old, sometimes to stimulate language is reading. If you're able to read a book, or sometimes libraries have library time, which is amazing because they just listen to the story. Also, if you can get an older girl or boy an 11-year-old, a 12-year-old, depending on the age of your child, to play a game, to read a book, anything that stimulates language. It doesn't always have to come in a formal way. I like saying that, Aliyah is a family affair, and you can put vocabulary words in your house. And Nicola, you mentioned, you have older kids, and everybody's learning Hebrew, and everybody's enjoying some of those funny mistakes. Other mistakes are less funny. But if you decide, today, this goes for all of you as well, learning the language. Today or this month, you're going to make, the fruits and vegetables on your shopping list in Hebrew. And you have the kids help you. How do you say apple? Everybody knows how to say tapuach because tapuach bidvash. But things like that stimulate language are always great tips to keep in mind.
I would also add that children in GAN situations, sometimes the Ganim in any case have girls who are sometimes doing their Shirut Lumi, their national service, and they're helping in a GAN for whatever reason. And if you feel that your child is frustrated because of lack of language, you can, of course, speak with the Ganenet, speak with the teacher, and see if there's a way to get some type of informal assistance through the Bat Shirut or through one-on-one with the Ganenet. It's all about communication, which is something we're going to talk about in a few minutes, between you and the educational staff. Aliza, did you want to please add something about possible assistance, after hours assistance through the municipality, through the Ministry of Education?
So I know we sometimes we also get the question about, if it's not their first year or if it's after, or, just needing additional assistance. It's really worth checking with your municipality. There are additional programs that are available to help Olim students outside of school. Some of these programs are programs from the municipality or from Misrad HaKlita, the Ministry of Aliyah and Integration, and it really changes between the different municipalities and what they have. So it's really worth, many municipalities have an Olim coordinator that work for the municipality that you can be in touch with on different municipal issues, but also worth hearing what other programs are available for Olim students in the community center or after school. So it really changes between the different communities. So it's worth checking and hearing and seeing and really communicating the needs of your children if you feel like they need that extra support or help outside of school.
Okay, thank you. So there is a question that's worthwhile, that's important to address. Are the 6 weekly Ulpan hours supposed to be one-on-one, or do group hours count?
Right. They're not supposed to be, they're not necessarily one-on-one. The school doesn't have to give each kid 6 individual hours. Your child is supposed to receive 6 weekly hours, and it's generally given out, again, it's something to check with the school, in groups. It could be that there's a few kids in similar grades that are Olim from different countries, and they're putting them together with an Ulpan teacher. So they're not obligated to give it as one-on-one. So that's, and again, the schools might work a little differently with the hours that they get and how they spread them out and the size of the groups. So definitely check that with the school.
Okay, I apologize if you already said it, Lisa, but I'll just, the number of hours that the school receives to help the Olim children grows as there are more Olim in the school. So again, it can be divided, as you said, okay? We were also told that our son who received Ulpan hours in 5th grade, our first year of Aliyah, will be eligible again for Ulpan hours once he enters high school in 7th grade. Is that not correct? Alisa, you want me to answer that, or do you want to answer that?
Go ahead, Sippy.
Okay, so it really depends on the school, meaning the school does not receive budget for your child for Ulpan hours after that first year. I would be curious. I would ask your son's school, what exactly are they talking about? Which school? 7th grade is middle grade, middle school, Chativat Beinaim. The school that all the kids go to, I'm not sure, what school it is, obviously, may offer those services because it might be a school that services a lot of Olim, and then may offer those services, just as a helpful push to all Olim kids when they arrive in 7th grade. But that is not something that's budgeted by the Ministry of Education. Okay. We're going to move to the next slide, if I can get to it. Okay. There we are. Okay. Other possible sources of assistance. So I did mention, I mentioned it as far as for the GAN age, but also for school age. Some schools do have girls who are doing their national service in the school, or boys who are doing their national service in the school. That's called Shehut Leumi. Sometimes it's for religious reasons. Sometimes it's for other reasons that people can't do their army service. And often if a school has such assistance in the school, you feel like your child does need extra help, you could turn, again, they're not professional Hebrew teachers, but sometimes even just sitting obviously one-on-one, your child with a 20-year-old boy or girl, sitting one-on-one to do homework together, to read together, to play a game together, that's one way of also getting assistance. So that's something you can ask about. Some schools also have volunteers, okay, that help in the school. Volunteers, I know of schools who've retired teachers who are willing to volunteer their time or interested in volunteering their time, or community members, and that you're not going to know about that unless you ask. Ask the Rakezet or the Rakaz Olim in school, the person who's in charge of the Olim in the school. If you don't know who that is, ask the school who that is. If your child is one of very few Olim, it might be the assistant principal, it might be a teacher, it might be the Yoetzet, the advisor. If it's a school with more Olim, there's going to be somebody who has that job called Rakaz or Rakezet Olim. Ask them, can they help you find a volunteer who can also sit with your child 1 hour a week, 2 hours a week, whatever it is, and do homework, go over reading, go over math, play a game if the child's younger. Everything that you do in Hebrew is going to be helpful for your child. There's also, of course, private tutoring, which is something that comes out of your own budget. And if the children are older, that can be very helpful. If the children are younger, or if the children are reluctant to actually sit with a tutor, you can look for extracurricular activities that are going to help them, either by socializing with other kids in the group, socialize, or speaking, of course, with the teacher. And one example that my colleague Miriam talked about with me was Gears, which is a really cool, it's empowering children through bicycling. But even if your child, for example, loves arts, drawing, arts and crafts, those are the type of extracurricular activities where your child can excel without necessarily knowing the language so well, or not knowing the language almost at all. So if your child has a passion for something, go and try and find in a small group, age appropriate, extracurricular activity. It will help them socialize, it'll help them feel good about themselves, help them learn another vocabulary for another topic. And then we talked about community resources. Some communities have homework clinics run by the municipality. I know, for example, Carmiel in the north has two options like that. One is run by soldiers who are doing their service in the city, and they have a homework clinic at the Merkaz Klita, the absorption center. And there's a homework clinic run by Bnot Shirut, the girls who are doing their service, national service in the city, and they run that once a week, like a homework clinic. Ask around. Ask each city or each municipality, each regional council has a department of education. That's a machleket chinuch. I'm not talking about the Misrad HaChinuch, that's the Department of Education, the government Department of Education. I'm talking about the department in the city, in your city or yeshuv's local municipality resources. Go and ask at that department, do they have any type of resources for your child after school, if that's what if you want more help and more framework. I would say that the younger the child, it's sometimes even better or smarter or easier. Your child will learn a lot of Hebrew as long as they're immersed in the language, not necessarily by doing homework, but immersed by doing some type of fun activity. Any of my colleagues want to add anything, or do you have any questions? What was just said? Okay.
Wait, Tibby, I'm just going to add, I'm sorry, I was muted. I don't know if I missed it. Did you mention about municipal coordinators?
I was going to say that. You say it now.
Many cities, not all cities, many cities have what's called a municipal coordinator, and the role of that municipal coordinator is to liaise between an ole and different municipal services that might be found in their city. For those of you in Yerushalayim, you might know Yisrael Cohen. For those of you in Beit Shemesh, you might know Tammy El Maliach. And Rehovot, for example, I know there's somebody here from Rehovot, may actually have somebody who can help you find out what other services are available for Olim in terms of language, because we were talking a lot about language. There's also the need sometimes for emotional support. I find that many times, you know, the kids who are happy-go-lucky in their city abroad, because of the challenges that they're having, sometimes it's social challenges, sometimes it's just challenges that were hidden under the surface, and a child was able to really get by without anybody noticing what some of those challenges were. And that sometimes is an invitation for you as that child's best advocate to seek out some type of counseling, some type of therapeutic resource to give your child room to breathe, room to talk, room to share. It might be something as simple as a big brother type of mentor, which many organizations have, or something like a small form of counseling, not because there's something deeply wrong, but because there's a hurdle in life, a traumatic hurdle actually, that your child has just experienced, and he may need help to overcome that.
Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to continue. Did you know? So I'm sure that, you know, we're unbelievably 4 months into the school year, and I'm sure you've noticed that there's a different rhythm, a different kind of roadmap in the school educational system in Israel. And there's a lot of different, you might have thought you understood the school system in the States. You might be very young parents and not have had experience. In any case, there's a lot of things in our school system here in Israel that's different than what you know. So just for example, I just put down a couple of examples. Vad Horim, which is actually mandated by law that each school has a Vad Horim. I used to liken it to the PTA, but I'm not sure that the PTA exists anymore in the United States. That's when I grew up. A Vad Horim is a parent committee, and it's made up of parent representatives. It's depending on if it's a citywide or from a regional council, they're voted in, they're elected actually, and it's supposed to have representatives from the broader population of the school. They help the school with lots of different everyday operations, being the liaison between the school and the parent body. Okay, theoretically the Vad Horim has say in the Israeli school system. There is a mandated curriculum, but there is a percentage of it in a mamlachti or mamlachti dati school. There is a percentage of the curriculum that is up to the school to decide what they want to put an emphasis on. For example, if it's an art school, if it's a school that does more Torani stuff, if it's a school that does puts an emphasis on teva, being outside. Okay, so that's the Vad Horim, who is supposed to help choose that emphasis together with the school. They're here to support, to support parents in all areas, and they're a good resource to turn to if you're having some type of issue with the school to try and understand, you know, kind of who are the players. There's also a Vad Kita, that's more of a group of parents in each class. Not every school has that, but some do. They're also the liaison with the homeroom class, which is a kind of also a different concept here in Israel. The homeroom teacher, which is a rough translation of mechanech or mechanechet. For those of you who don't know what a mechanech or mechanechet is, which I'm sure you do, that's your child's main teacher. And even if you don't know Hebrew, it's good to understand that word. It comes from chinuch, which means education, not just teaching. In some schools, the mechanech or mechanechet is called the Rav mechanech. It's all the same thing. And in addition to teaching your children, depending on what age, the subjects they teach your children, as they get older, their mechanech so often teaches them less hours, but they're the ones, they're not just there to collect the money for a class trip or whatever. They actually have hours set aside during the week to have sha'at mechanech, which is a class. It could be 20 minutes, it could be a full session, it could be 10 minutes. And really, it's the time that the teacher brings up, it could be a lot of things, current events, it could be a problem that's occurring among the kids in the class. It could be preparation for a seminar that the kids are going to, or a hike that the kids are going to. It's not the same. I know growing up, I had my homeroom teacher who either I liked, I didn't like, but really had not that much interaction on an erki, on a values level. They weren't there to inculcate me with values, and in Israel, the mechanech is very much there to inculcate the children with the values that the school stands for. Do one of my colleagues want to add something to that? Okay, other things on this slide. Other things, did you know, I'm sure you already know about the class WhatsApp group, because I'm sure you're all a part of it. And they can WhatsApp you to death kind of with so many different messages. It's hard to know. Sometimes it's really overwhelming as a parent, an OLET parent who's also struggling with Hebrew. It's sometimes very overwhelming to know which messages are important and which are less necessary. I think in general, a good rule of thumb would be pay attention to what the teacher writes. But this is a time to, suggest, even if your school gave a buddy to your child, some schools do that, it's also good to get a buddy for you as a parent, and you can speak with your child's mechanech if they have a suggestion, if she can pair you up, if it's really overwhelming to understand what all these messages are. Maybe there's another parent in the class who speaks English and who can be your kind of your guide through all those messages, through the special events that happen during the school year, and be your buddy to help you understand specifically what's happening in your child's class and in general what's happening in the school year. The other point I wanted to cover here is parent-teacher communication. Sometimes when I say to people, you should call your child's teacher, they're like, what? And in Israel, it is perfectly acceptable. It's expected for you to use your teacher's WhatsApp number, cell phone number, to call and or WhatsApp. It's not, we shouldn't lose our manners, and it's perfectly acceptable to call a teacher at a normal time and say, hi, my name is Tzipi. My son, Micha, is in your class. Is this a good time to speak? And the teacher would then say yes, or would then say no. Why don't we speak at such and such a time? But it is expected in Israel for you to be the advocate and person to reach out to the teacher. Now, of course, the teachers want to put special emphasis on Nuolim in their class and help them. The reality is that the classes are very large and the teachers have a lot on their shoulders, and sometimes they just don't get to it. So don't wait. It's acceptable and okay and expected for you to communicate with your teacher, with your child's teacher, by calling, by WhatsApp. You can send a note, sometimes by email. It depends on how the teacher has initiated communication with you, but don't be shy. The opposite. You should be proactive in advocating for your child, especially now at this time of year. We're enough months in that you might get a feel for things that your child needs assistance with, or things you're not clear about, or things that your child's not clear about. Does anybody want to add anything to that or ask any questions?
I've put something in the chat for everybody to look at, something called a machberet kesher. A machberet kesher is a designated machberet or notebook where you can communicate directly with your child's teacher. It's a good way to keep up that communication.
Thank you. So that's it brought me to the next slide. There's a lot of cultural differences in Israel, in the Israeli school system. And sometimes it can be a real culture shock. For example, if you visit your child's school during recess, which is called here hafsaka. And if in the States recesses are pretty supervised, in some schools in Israel, they're very not supervised. And it can be a wonderful, liberating independence for the kids, and it can also turn into something very difficult for your child if they're not used to that, or if it comes up to bullying, which is a problem. I think probably in schools, certainly in Israel, I'm not going to say it's not a problem in North America. I'm going to talk about here. And Hafsakot is a hard time sometimes for some children because the supervision can be very lax. If you're not aware of your child's school day schedule, it's good to know. The classes are usually the classes are 40 minutes. There might be a 5 or 10-minute hafsakah, and then twice a day there's a much longer hafsakah. One is for arochat eser, where the kids eat their snack. And I'm sure you've already, found your own rhythm with your children, what to send with them. And for many Israeli children, they don't eat anything or barely eat anything before they leave home. Maybe a little sandwich bag with some cereal. And then at 9:45, when the hafsakat eser, when the 10 o'clock break is, which might be at 9:45, that's when they take out a sandwich, maybe a piece of fruit, maybe some vegetables, whatever it is that you send with your child, and that's when they have their breakfast. Another something that's very different in Israel as opposed to in the States is discipline. I'm not saying schools here don't discipline the children. They certainly want to, but it's different. And I know I remember a story with a family whose child came home and he was very upset. And why was he upset? Because the kids kept on pushing him. And tried to figure out what it was. And really they pushing and slapping on the back. And really what they were doing was, hey, Achi, how are you? How you doing, buddy? And it might have been a little bit extreme and inappropriate for anybody, but it might have just been the normal Israeli way of kind of stepping in other people's personal space. The idea of personal space is very different. I'm sure you've seen that in your own interactions with Israelis, and your children are also experiencing that. So you kind of need to be aware of these things so you can understand when your child comes home, what they're feeling, what they've experienced, and ask questions. Might be wonderful for your child, but it might also be very difficult, that very close nature between the kids. I have Machber Kesher here. Tiul Shnati, if you are not aware, is a big thing in schools. They actually have a lot of, I find in schools, they have a lot of excursions, outings, and the Tiul Shnati is kind of the pinnacle where they go away. When they're younger, it's for one day. When they're older, it can be for overnight, 1 night or 2 nights. And Olim children might be hesitant to go on such an overnight trip. I think you need to be sensitive to your child's wants, needs, desires, while also encouraging, because it is an experience that really bonds the class together if they feel comfortable being a part of that. I'm not going to go over all the other stuff here because time is going quickly. Thank you, Miriam, for reminding me the class sizes do vary. Okay, school calendar in general is just the school begins on September 1st, ends on June 30th. For the middle school and high school, they end earlier. That's different if you're talking about the Atzma'i, the Haredi schools. They have a different schedule and different vacation times. In general, the school calendar follows the Jewish holidays, even though it follows the secular calendar as far as when school begins and when school ends in the year. There is a question about registration, and I do want to talk about that a minute. So, Miriam, do you want to talk about registration? Are you comfortable doing that?
Sure.
Okay.
School registration, different from many other places abroad, happens on a yearly basis. You may feel, okay, I've registered my child, he's 5 or 6 years old, and that's going to hold him until he finishes that elementary school, but that's actually not the way it goes. Depending on your school system, you will register either directly with the school. In the Haredi system, you're going to register with the school, and that registration happens in and around Chodesh Adar, in and around Purim time. You may already start to see advertisements in the local circulars that go around town, where you may get something from the school about registration. This is because they're not sure if your child's going to continue or not, because especially in a first year, but for many Israelis as well, it's not always the right chemistry. You put your child in a particular school, especially as Noled, the first year, the second year, and you may come to think, is my child right for this school? Is the school right for my child? In the more public school systems, whether it's the Mamlakti or the Mamlakti Dati system, you will be able to re-register your child typically through the municipal website. There's a link that you will find for registration. And again, you're going to begin to hear the buzz around town, the buzz in your school about registration. If your children are younger, there were some people here who have 2-year-olds who might have children younger, and you want to know how you are going to register for GAN. If it's a GAN that's not yet associated with a school system, then you're going to register through the municipality. Again, typically through the website of the municipality. And if you need guidance for that, please let us know. It doesn't happen yet. Again, it typically happens somewhere between Chodesh Shvat and Chodesh Adar, February, March time. If your children are a little bit older, not yet in the grades, and you're beginning to think of a school system, then you definitely are going to now in these months begin to network with others so that you can have a much more educated decision on which schools that you want to send to in your neighborhood.
Thank you. There is also a question that was sent to me. Based on what criteria should we pick a school? And that's an excellent, excellent question. There's so many ways to answer that, or so many components to in that answer. And it really depends on you. The first thing you should consider is the school's hashkafa, their outlook. Okay, so do you want a religious school? Do you want a non-religious school? Do you want an ultra-Orthodox school, a Haredi school? Other things to consider are do you want a public school that won't cost you, or except for the fees, which always cost, or are you going to look for a semi-private school that will cost you more? I think the real consideration, though, is what is the school's outlook? What is their, again, their hashkafa, okay? I would be happy to who wrote this question in, or anybody else who's attending, if you wanted to have a conversation about that, please call us, star 3680. You can ask for me, you can ask for Miriam, you can ask for Lisa. Any of us on the team are happy to have a more in-depth conversation about it, okay? Another thing, by the way, is also location. To register for GAN, you need to show that you are living, your child for kindergarten, that you are living in that school. You need that school, in that city. You need to have a rental contract. You need to be showing that you're living in that city, or that's the address on your child's Teudat Zehut, okay? I hope that covers it. If you have more questions about that, please type them in. Okay, I think this is really important. Helpful hints to succeed. You are now 4 months into the school year. You still have a lot more of the school year to go, and God be willing, more and more years. Now is the time, sometimes you hear people saying, or we'd hear people saying, I thought by Hanukkah my child will be speaking Hebrew, but that's not true, meaning it so depends on your child. It depends on the age. It depends on their inclination to learn a language. Some children don't speak until they can say a full sentence, and some children will spit out words one at a time and learn to put the sentences together. The best advice is to continue learning Hebrew as a family, which hopefully you did also before you came. Encourage your child to speak Hebrew, not necessarily with you if you want to keep their child, the English is your dominant language between you and the child, but you can encourage them when they're with friends. You can, bravo, bravo. Your child speaking a sentence in Hebrew in a store to a storekeeper is a big deal, and you should let your child know that that's a big deal. If you need to, think about next year. It's still a little early, but if you think you're going to need extra private tutorial sessions for your child, start budgeting for that now, okay? I think advocating for your child, which is what we talked about, meaning you need to be the one in touch with the school to see, are they getting what they should be getting as far as the Sha'ot Olim, the school open hours, and are there other ways, other services, other volunteers, other frameworks that they can get more assistance. And lastly, it's very important that both you and your child have realistic expectations. If your child comes home with 20 questions, homework in history, 20 questions that require written answers, you need to be in touch with the teacher to say, either my child will answer these questions in English, we'll help together figure out what the questions are, or please pare down these questions. A child who made Aliyah in September and is now in December really can't be expected to answer those 20 questions. What are your expectations as your parent? What would be a good expectation for your child? And don't forget to really encourage your children and be their cheerleaders on the side as they continue to improve or learn Hebrew. You're going to be getting this in the follow-up email, okay? Resources, we have a list of helpful vocabulary related to school system that is worth it for you to look at, important for you to look at and learn those. Some of them are really important phrases of, for example, Yoetzet, the school advisor, the Mechanechet, and so on. We actually have an article about school registration, which I've noted here, and a general information article. So that's going to be sent in the follow-up email. And we're going to open it up to questions. This is the last slide. So where to turn, and we spoke about the municipality coordinator. We spoke about the in-school resources. We didn't speak so much about the school psychological support system that there is psychologists, which maybe Miriam, you want to say a word or two, and we'll take questions. And here again is our Nefesh B'Nefesh phone number. There is a dedicated email address, education@nbn.org.il, or send it to us at answers@nbn.org.il. I'm losing my voice. Miriam, can you just say something about the services that are provided both in the GAN and in the school by the school psychologist?
Yeah. So many schools and many school systems have a psychologist. One psychologist may cover a variety of schools, and his or her job, very often in the Ganim, is to assess if your child is ready to move up. If he's 3, is he ready to move up to the 4-year-old GAN 4 to 5, and then to Kita Aleph? What are they looking at? They're looking at, are they socially ready? Are they academically ready? Are you concerned? Perhaps, somewhere in and around March, April, May, you may say to your child's kindergarten teacher, to their ganenet, that you're not sure that your son is ready to move up. He's a December baby. He's really anyway now the youngest, and I think I'd like to keep him back a year. That's not an unpopular discussion to have. On the other hand, you might say, it's true, my child was born the end of December, but he's a real go-getter. He's socially, active. He's right there. He has lots of friends, and I really do want him to go up to 1st grade. Other times that psych services might be looked at in the school. Is an evaluation needed? And who can you turn to for an evaluation? The psychologist might provide that information. The psychologist isn't going to be the one to do the evaluation because he's an outside person. In many schools in North America, you have a very large civet. You have a very large staff of not only the teachers, but those professionals who work in the school together with the teachers for the students. It might be a social worker in the school, the guidance counselors, of course, in the school. There might be psychological services provided in the school. And here it's a little bit different. And for any of those needs, if you feel that your child isn't learning the way that you feel is being successful for him, or that he's lagging behind, or again, he may have been able to really just sort of cover up some of his own learning needs in the States or in Canada because it was all in English and he didn't have to work so hard. And now certain things are coming through the cracks, and there may need to be that need for an evaluation, for an educational evaluation to understand, does he have any specific learning styles that are not being addressed. There's also something called a Mora Metakenet. A Mora Metakenet is a resource room type of teacher. The Mora Metakenet is going to take your child out once or twice a week for learning strategies. This is not Ulpan, this is not Hebrew related. This is learning style related and learning challenges. Okay, those are some of those resources. I see, Tippy, we have a lot of questions.
We do. And I have some that were also sent to me privately. So let me dig one. I'm going to deal with one that was sent to me privately, and then we can go on some more. Can you talk about after school hours, after school programs? What age does that start? For 3-year-olds, do you recommend to register for these after school activities? So just to be clear, GAN, which is kindergarten, begins at the age of 3. GAN lasts for 3 years. The last year is called GAN Chova, which means compulsory GAN. That's the year, that's what we would be parallel to kindergarten in the States. And the 2 years previous are also called GAN. They have after school, sometimes it's called Saharon. It costs money. You need to pay for that. Some schools have also for 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade. Miriam, you might be able to, I know in the schools in my area, it depends on the school. It depends on the city. Usually obviously parents who work full-time need to take advantage of those programs because they're working when the school or the GAN ends. And sometimes parents find that as a very good, helpful framework for their children, even if they're in Ulpan or looking for a job. An at-home mom might want their kids to be at home. It really depends on you. It depends on your child and your family situation and how well you deal with your children. The child in the first year of Aliyah, it might be the best thing in the world for your child to finish GAN at 1:15, 2, and come home and be with Ima. Or it might be much better for your child to be in the after school, Saharon, whatever it's called in your area, because that allows them to continue to socialize both in Hebrew and socialize in general. So it really depends a lot on your child and on your family situation. Just so you should know, and this is a long way off yet, but summer vacation is 2 full months. The first 2 full months, except in the Haredi school system, and in the Mamlakti school system, Mamlakti Dati school system, 2 full months, July and August. Often in July, there is they call it Beit Sefer L'Kayitz, or summer school. It's not what you're thinking. When I went to summer school, I learned math, I learned English. These are fun days. It's kind of like camp run on the school campus. Miriam, do you want to answer another one of the questions? Any of them here?
I answered some of them privately, but I will, because they were asked to me privately, but I would like to globalize one of the questions. One of the questions I think can be relevant to everyone is who's responsible, or what happens if your child isn't meeting certain milestones educationally, developmentally, that you feel that either they have in the past and now they're lagging, or that they're just not meeting. Perhaps it's a younger child or somebody who is already in 3rd or 4th grade and you feel that something is missing. So you may want to first compare and think, how are they doing at home? How is their speech at home? How is their motor coordination at home? Has anything about them at home changed? That's number one. Always look first there. Second, bring it up to your teacher. I notice X, or are you noticing X? And the teacher might say, I have 27 other kids in the class. And now that you mention it, and she or he may begin to share his own thoughts. Bring it up with your pediatrician. Bring it up if your child is younger, under the age of 6, with Tipat Chalav. Tipat Chalav is the agency in Israel that deals with well baby care and developmental care. They are also responsible for immunizations for children under the age of 6. And so here you might want to make an appointment and say, we came when my child was 2, and I noticed that since then his speech is not developing. Now there's also that real concept for children who are bilingual I know this as a grandmother of many, and my mother, who's a speech pathologist, who will often tell me, your children, meaning my grandchildren, are learning 2 languages at the same time. It will take longer because they're figuring it all out. Or as your kids get older, you're going to hear them speak, I know it's not cookies. I want some cookies. They too get a little bit messed up, and then you have a lot of Hebrew on your hands. But do take any of those concerns seriously. That gut feeling, dads who are listening, I don't mean to exclude you, but a mom's gut feeling about her child is almost always on the mark, and move forward with it.
Okay, thank you. So there's also 2 questions about the open houses for schools, how to deal with that when your level of Hebrew isn't very high. I'm going to let Miriam answer that, but I also want to say something. It's definitely a challenge, and it's going to remind you anytime you go to something like that, why, I'm also not just my child, I'm an Oleh Chadash. How am I going to manage this? So first of all, pay attention to things that you don't need language. What other parents are there? What are the teachers? Who are the teachers? How are they dressed? Is it in your style? Is it in your fashion? Does the school look on the walls of the school in the classrooms? What is being decorated? What topics are being presented, if you could understand? That will give you some feel for the school. But in addition, I think it's perfectly advisable and okay to be in touch with the school separately, and introduce yourself and say you're an Oleh Chadash. You want to speak with somebody, hopefully who speaks English, about the school, but also if this is a child's 2nd year in Israel, you want to understand what the school is going to offer to assist your child in continuing his or her integration in the school system, in the Israeli society, in learning Hebrew, and so on and so on. So a one-to-one meeting would be appropriate if it's with the principal, the assistant principal, the Rakaz Olim. It's not going to be simple for you. Do you have a neighbor, a friend, somebody else in the community who's thinking about sending their child there, who can help you understand a little bit more of what's being said? But you have to, try to take the try to pay attention to things that are not language based when you go to those open houses, and go from there. Would you want to add anything to that, both Aliza or Miriam?
I think it's challenging, and that's the bottom line. As you mentioned earlier, Tzipi, to find a buddy, another parent in the class, can be very helpful. Don't not go just because you're also showing the teacher you are an upstanding adult, just as language disabled as your child, right? So just as your child is fantastic, you're fantastic, but you're language disabled. So can you please tell me again what you said very slowly? Or I just didn't understand this one point, but forge ahead, because you will get there. And it's humbling. It is, as is your first few years as a new immigrant. You made Aliyah, you're called an Olah, but if you had decided to move to Ireland, the English is very different, and you'd be an immigrant, and you would have less expectations of everything around you. Give yourself time, breathe, look for help, and it helps your child when he sees that mom and dad are also looking for help. That it's hard for mom and dad also, but this is, the bigger picture is what you want. The bigger picture is your goal. And sometimes we have to ask directions in order to get to where we want to go.
Thank you very much. What other questions did we not cover? Somebody's asking specifically about schools around, but Ramat Beit Shemesh, that would be
I answered that.
Terrific. Okay. So this question, is it considered acceptable to advocate for your child on the English side as well? Something as simple saying, can I please send in an English language workbook for my daughter that she can do while the other children are learning the alphabet in English class? It's certainly acceptable. Yeah, it's more than acceptable. That's your duty as a parent that's called advocating for your child. Now you have to be willing to hear the teacher's response. If the response is to your liking, then amazing. It's a win-win situation. If the response is something else, I've heard different responses. Some like, well, no, you can't do that. That'll be disruptive, but she'll help teach other children. you don't like that response, continue the conversation, communication. It's certainly acceptable as long as any questions or comments you make are made in a polite and in a polite manner and respectful manner. And hopefully you'll get a response that's polite and respectful and that takes your child into consideration. What your child does during English class is an interesting question that some Olim parents struggle with. And if the child's young enough, it actually can be the time that your child can shine. Maybe the only time they can shine in an academic subject during their first year of school. So you might want to keep that for him and let him or her shine. If the child's older, that might be very frustrating for them to sit there. So it's something that needs to be talked about also with the school, with the teacher, with the English teacher, and so on. Yes. Do we have any more questions? Okay.
Excellent. I would like to remind everyone that the worst place to be is stuck in a corner. And that is really what we're here for. Tzipi, Aliza, myself, many of you know already, we're part of a larger team. We all have our specialties and we work with each other. So as I told somebody earlier today, if you called me and wanted to know about mortgages, I am not the person to speak to. But I am the person to speak to about Haredi education, about healthcare, about lots of different things. You want to know about Ulpan hours? You got Aliza. You want to know about almost everything? We all have our specialties. Don't get stuck. Aliza put our contact information in the beginning. I'm going to put it again here at the end. And please don't hesitate to be in touch. And thank you for joining.
I will thank you all also. I'm going to say the phone number *3680. We answer that phone Sunday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. We do not go home at 3 p.m. 3 p.m. is when we start liaising with various government officials and other professionals to help assist you with your issues. So try us during that time. Send us an email. We're looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you very, very much, Miriam. Thank you very much, Aliza. Thank you all for taking time out of your, I'm sure, very busy days and evenings and nights. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Tzipi. Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Bye-bye.